Hey, and welcome back. This is the Marketer of the Day podcast, and we're here with John Ainsworth from datadrivenmarketing.co. And data-driven marketing empowers online course creators to escalate their revenue through the innovation of strategic funnel optimization. And so we're going to be talking about how John has this amazing company where they offer this sort of done-for-you sales funnel building agency where you can 2 to 5x your online course revenue. So, John, glad to be speaking with you.
You too, man. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And so we gave a little bit of an introduction for you. Did I leave anything out, or is there like a better elevator pitch in your own words? What are you up to? What's your passion? What's your focus?
So what we do is we help online course creators who've already built an audience to, on average, 5 times their revenue. So someone's got hundreds of thousands of YouTube views a month, or they've got a big Instagram following, something like that. And we have this strategic funnel optimization process, and normally it can about 5 times their revenue. And most of that is only paid on results. So they pay us when they make more money.
Well, that sounds amazing in many ways.
Yeah, right. So the way we're able to do that, I was just reading your article, Keep It Shippable, Stupid. Do you remember writing that? I don't know when that was from.
Many years ago, but it still applies.
And a lot of the stuff that we do follows the same kind of concept of what you're talking about there. It's what bits can you strip out, what bits are required for definite, and what bits really are not. And we've gone through for years, we've done all the different marketing tactics, webinars and email promotions and sideways sales letters and second upsells in play, all these different kind of things. And what we did is we tracked for all of them. How long did it take to do it? What results did it get? What percentage of people did it work for? How much money did they actually make from it? And we found that most of them worked either only some of the time or didn't get massive results. So for example, having a second upsell in place, generally with a second upsell, 5 to 10% of people who buy the original offer will buy that as well. And so it does add revenue, but it doesn't add masses of revenue because only 5 to 10% of people who generally buy, whereas the first upsell gets you 10 to 20%. So it's massively more important to have a first upsell than it is to have 2. So if you're going to try and decide what needs doing, yes, definitely do an upsell. Do you do a second upsell? Maybe, depends on the size of that particular promotion, what else is going on. So using that, we went through and did an 80-20 analysis of everything and stripped it right back to what is it that really makes a difference? What works every single time? And that's what that strategic funnel optimization process is. And that's how come we're able to help people to make so much more money when we work with them.
I love that concept that it's really easy to chase the shiny objects and just say, oh, I read some article here that says I should do this and add this button. And you have to wonder, probably most people don't apply the brain power they should. Is that safe to say that the average person really doesn't test enough or doesn't experiment enough, or maybe they're too close to their own business, or there's too much of this negative emotional baggage for them to really jump in and apply some of these kind of just experiments that you're talking about?
Yeah, and most people just don't have the volume of data to be able to do it. If you've got a course business and you're running a promotion every couple of months or even once a month, how many months does it take before you manage to collect all this data? And you're doing all this other stuff. You're making the courses and you're building the sales pages and you're writing the emails and all this kind of thing. Whereas because we only work with course businesses, we've been able to go through and run these tests dozens and dozens of times and collect that data way faster than an individual person could. And what's tricky is all of the tactics that I mentioned, the sideways sales letters and the webinars and the automated webinars and all this kind of stuff, right? They all work, but they work for specific kinds of business and specific kinds of situations. And it's really tricky as the person who's reading the article from someone who's trying to convince you that, this kind of webinar is absolutely the one to go for. It's hard to tell, is that right for me? And people who've got lots of courses at a cheap product, I'm mostly working with people who are selling stuff $100, $200, $300, that kind of thing, and who've got a good size email list and don't do stuff in person and they don't do live coaching, that kind of thing. It's just the cheaper products. That particular audience, a particular set of tactics really works for them. And so it's really important to know which ones are those. And nobody else, as far as I could tell, and maybe I just haven't come across them, as far as I could tell, nobody else was doing that research and figuring out specifically for info products and course creators. You look at e-commerce businesses, And there are people who are just working with e-com businesses, and there's coaching for that. And so it's like, okay, cool. You can go look at what works there and what works with SaaS. But it didn't seem to be the case with course businesses, which was tricky for these guys then.
That's interesting to think about, that you have these industries and these price points, and there's all these factors where it's like, well, this one tool like webinars or the sideways sales letters or whatever, it sounds like a good idea, but then it might not work for where you're at, and it's really easy to like drive yourself crazy, or even worse, to try that thing one time, right? And then you give up, and then you say, oh, well, now I'm just going to dial back my efforts, versus someone like you who comes in with all this data and kind of can approach it logically. And so where do we even begin with all of this? Like when you like you're obviously all about the testing and the conversion and the data, and saying like, well, here's what you have set up and it's already sort of working, but we can make it work better. But it seems like does that like just drive you crazy? Does it drive you mental? Just like, where do you even begin as far as like the logical problem solving of this?
What, like the how you do the testing of it, or how do you mean?
Or just like, when you say, well, you have this customer, and you say, well, you, instead of doing a webinar, you should do this. Like, how do you even identify like where the problem is and what the new solution should be?
Yeah, so for the very particular kind of clients that we work with, like I said before, big audience, big size email list, low ticket prices, we've got this system that's figured out. And so that's why it's one system, and it works for this one kind of client, and we just like are super picky about who we'll work with. So that's kind of how we've figured it out now. And so the process there is, you do an email promotion every single month, and in the email promotion, you point people to a sales page, and then there's a checkout page with an order bump and an upsell. And the sales page has these 15 crucial elements on it. And the checkout page has these 6 crucial elements on it. And you write the copy in a certain way, and you get the information to write the copy in a certain way from the customer avatar server. Like, we've got this whole system for it. If you're not in that situation, if you're like, I don't know which of these things to do, like, I'll tell you how we look at it. It's, if you go through, there's like a few steps to this, right? In terms of figuring out the problem solving process. What you want to do is map out, what's your funnel at the moment? What's the process that somebody goes through to buy, particularly like the critical path of it? So let's say in our case, it's, email to sales page to checkout page. Well, really, it's with email, it's how many people open the email, and then how many people click on the email, and then how many people actually view the sales page, because that might not be the same as the number of people who click on the email, and then how many get to the checkout page, and then how many buy. So those are all the little steps that you've got, and you map that out in your funnel. And then you make a spreadsheet, and you put the numbers that you have for each of those stages in your funnel in that spreadsheet. And then you have a column in between each one, and you figure out the conversion percentage. So like, what percentage of people open the emails, and what percentage of them click through to the sales page, etc. So then once you've got that, then you go look at benchmark data. So you find a bunch of other people who are doing this thing quite well, or you Google articles about this or what have you, to try and find like, what is decent number for that. And I can tell you the ones for our, that we work with. So for example, it's like a 30% open rate is really good, and a 5% click-through rate to the sales page, and a 20% from the sales page to the checkout page, and between 20 to 50% from checkout page to buying. Like, those are really good numbers. If you've got an order bump, it's 20 to 50% of people getting that. And if you've got an upsell, it's 10 to 20% of people getting that. Now that took us a lot of testing to find those numbers, right? But like, if you can find ballpark what that number should be, and then you look at which step in your process is furthest from that benchmark. Maybe your open rate is really good and your click-through rate is really good, but hardly any people are getting from your sales page to the checkout page. Well, that means your sales page sucks. Let's say that conversion rate as good as 20% and you're only getting 8%. Like, oh, okay, well, I could definitely make this better. Let me work on that first. Now, if you're trying to figure out like, which of those tactics do you use webinar, or do you use direct to sales page and what have you, that's much trickier. That's much more like, okay, find people who've got a business exactly like yours and try and model them. Because webinars is amazing, but they're only really good for more expensive offers. And there's a certain kind of webinar that works for selling directly, and a certain kind of webinar that works for selling via a sales call afterwards, and a certain kind of funnel that goes with it. And so don't just follow the latest shiny tactic. You've got to go look for, what is somebody who's got a business like mine who's doing really well, what tactics are they using? And that's more likely to be the appropriate one.
I love this. And it's whenever I'm having a podcast guest, I'm kind of trying to get the information in multiple angles, right? Because like the kind of the flat, boring way of learning is just, well, what are the facts? But then you think about, well, what's the person's sort of mindset and problem solving thought process? And then there's some kind of aspect of like, well, what's the kind of like the pre-education? Like what could someone do on their own as far as just these simple tasks that you're talking about, just to so they can get an idea of their own numbers. So that way when they come to you, they're kind of better educated and they can kind of get these kind of foundational building blocks in place. So I love your mindset here where you're saying that, so if this person is someone who is like one of your future prospects, right? Like a future data-driven marketing prospect, there's someone that has, if I'm understanding you right, a large audience, and then $100 to $300 sort of low ticket price point for a course. And you're saying that a logical first step to get started is to bust out the Sharpie and the piece of paper and to draw out this funnel, which could be kind of fun. And I imagine that a lot of people probably haven't even do this. I can't even remember what year was I last did this, and just draw out the funnel and say, okay, well, I'm going to go from the monthly email promotion to the sales letter and the checkout page and the order bump and the upsell. And then you're saying that then go from the drawing, the doodle, to the spreadsheet and just check your stats, check your numbers, and figure out what these percentages are, which again, most people don't even do that either. And then go and look online and look in your industry specifically in your sort of offers and figure out what is a healthy number for each of those conversion rates. That way you can sort of identify what the bottlenecks are. And then when you figure out what a problem to focus on, then the question is, well, what am I doing wrong? Then the answer is to just look at some of these competitors and kind of see the trends, or see what it seems like they all seem to be doing right with their checkout pages, with their webinars. Like, what do you see repeatedly that they all kind of seem to have in common? And so that's a wonderful kind of way to get tapped in to your more like data and kind of funnel driven mindset. And I want to make sure that we tackle some stories though, because stories are always fun, right? Especially when we talk about where someone had a just sort of okay business, but they came across you and it was the best thing that ever happened to them, right? Their life changed, their business changed. So what do you have as far as a fun sort of before and after story where you applied some of this magic?
Yeah, so I was talking at a conference a couple of years ago, and somebody came up to me after I gave a talk about funnels and was like, "Oh, I'd love to work with you." And I asked her about her YouTube channel, because she had a big YouTube channel for people learning languages. And I said, "What kind of size is it?" And she told me it was like 6 million subscribers, massive audience. And she was making like a few thousand a month. And she told me, I asked her, like, well, how much would you like to make? And she told me she really wanted to make 10,000 a month. And I just laughed in her face. And I didn't do it on purpose, but I was like, that's ridiculous. It's like, it's impossible that you'll make as little as 10,000 a month. I was like, the smallest amount you'll make is 30,000 a month. And so she was like, okay, well, let's see about that. And I was wrong. The first month she made $50,000, and she never made any less than that ever. And she now does more than 2 million a year with her business doing it. And I just was away with her in Bangkok. She gave a talk up on stage and kind of shared her story with everybody there. So it's just really fun when there's like people who, what's happened, right? The people who we work with are the ones who've built this massive latent potential in their business, and they don't even know that they've really done it. They're creators. They're people who love making content, and they just love sharing it. And they've made the best content they possibly could. And they've built up SEO traffic, or a podcast, or Instagram, or YouTube, or whatever it might happen to be. And they've made these courses for people, but they've never learned how do you actually sell the courses to the audience. So some people buy because their audience is so big, and then we can come along and actually help them to have this giant, leap forwards. We've got someone we're working with at the moment. He started a few months ago, and he was doing like 25,000 a month, something in that kind of ballpark. And he'd been doing that amount for like a year or 2 years, and he was getting quite frustrated. It's like, how can I actually manage to grow this? He works with architects and helps them to run their business better. And he was, when the promotion actually went out, he was on a boat with his family, but he was still checking the, Teachable account to see how many sales they'd been making. And he showed it to his wife, and she said to him, well, that can't be right. Because he made like $120,000 that month. And it's just like, oh, I had so much fun, like just helping people who've been working and slogging away at this thing for so many years to realize the potential of what they're doing now.
I love it. And the latent potential, as you said, right? Because they've done a lot of things right. And they maybe even, despite all the maybe mistakes is not the right term, but just like they've succeeded in spite of themselves, right? And they've lucked out and they made a few few conversions, but there's just so much untapped potential in there as far as looking at what they did right and repeating the process and just like finding the bottlenecks and finding the low hanging fruit and setting these sorts of things up properly. And I imagine perhaps setting them up with some kind of consistency, right? Because you even mentioned like the monthly email, and like how many people do you and I both know where they don't even know when the last time is that they sent an email, let alone how many opens and how it converted. And maybe it wasn't even part of a monthly strategy in order to like relaunch a course. It was just like sending some random email. So I think we all need some amount of discipline and predictability and best practices and growth in our business to get it done. And so there's so much to think about and so many possibilities. But then as far as these many businesses that you help succeed, right? There is kind of the putting things in place, putting them in properly, finding the bottlenecks. But do you see anything in common? Like, do they all like need help with the sales page or the email promotion? Or is there any kind of tidbit you can give us as far as just like commonalities of what can be improved?
Yeah, so that I see the same fundamental mistakes just again and again and again. It's almost always identical. So first of all, people don't send out email promotions regularly. So they send out, and we've got Black Friday coming up at the moment, right? When we're recording this episode, everybody sends out emails for Black Friday and everybody makes a bunch more sales. And then they don't send any more promotions unless they're launching a new course. So what that means is that they know that sending emails makes money, but they don't send emails. And it's like, this is insane. And the reason is because they're really nervous about being scummy and scammy and salesy, and they don't want everyone to hate them and unsubscribe and just feel like they're really pushing stuff all the time. But they haven't considered the possibility that you can send really good email promotions where the actual emails you send are useful and moving someone towards a sale. And if you learn how to do that, the whole thing becomes fun and enjoyable, and your audience loves getting your emails, and your unsubscribe rate goes down and you make a lot more money. So that's one of them, is that people just don't send out these promotions. And then, like you mentioned about the sales page, people make the same mistakes with sales pages all the time. There's like 15 crucial elements to a sales page. It's things like, you've got to have a compelling headline, not just the name of your product. You need to have a subheadline. You need to call out your audience. You've got to have problem, agitation, solution, testimonials, frequently asked questions, a guarantee. It's not rocket science. This is not stuff that had never been thought of before. It's the fundamentals, getting them done right every time. Same kind of thing with a checkout page. Have a reminder of what they're buying, have a picture of the product, have a guarantee, have testimonials, have a few points about the benefits on the checkout page. That these kinds of things can massively increase results, but people just aren't doing it. And then, so that's one kind of thing. It's like actually doing the promotions well. Second thing I see as a major theme is most people aren't doing enough to build their email list. These are people who've put lots of work into building traffic, but they're not taking their lead magnet and making sure it's brilliant and then promoting the heck out of it. Like, you need to promote if you've got a YouTube channel, promote the lead magnet, and probably it's either every video, or some people say like every second or third video, to kind of keep YouTube happy and not send people off the platform, but like consistently, regularly promote it, have it in the description, mention it in the video. So if you have a bigger email list and you send promotions, that really, really helps. And the third thing people go wrong with is they have their revenue per sale is too low. So they don't have order bumps, they don't have upsells, they don't have a way for, if someone spent some money, for them to spend some more money easily with you. And order bumps is just so straightforward, such a simple tactic. And on average, it increases revenue by 19% on its own, if not including any of the other things that we've just talked about today. And most people just don't consistently have an order bump in place. And so those are the kind of things I just see people fundamentally missing again and again.
And easy enough to fix as long as we apply the attention on the numbers and have some of awareness and revisit our own business and just focusing on these fundamentals, as you're saying. Send more emails, promote the lead magnet more, give another pass on that sales letter. And you're so right that when you look at a sales letter that just has something wrong with it, you can almost just like, it's like you look at it and like, they lost me at some point. And when you go back and understand why, you're like, well, in these like 15 steps that you mentioned, like headline and subheadline and problem, agitate, solve, it's like, well, they skipped this step, or like these steps were out of order, and things like adding that order bump in there. These are all just like simple things that they're so simple that people have allowed them to be boring, and they've instead focused on the day-to-day, the putting out the fires, the reading some new article about some new thing, but it might not apply to you. And it's like, well, it's time to go back and just look at just the simple parts of your business and look at this really basic stuff that maybe you heard about early on, but just need to revisit and go back to. And so, but it can also be difficult to do with all this, extra time in the day, like trying to find the time in the day to do it and having to switch gears and having to learn. So I can understand how someone could greatly benefit from a company such as yours with this kind of data-driven mindset and to jump in and to look at it. So can you tell us about maybe some next steps here? Like, what's your company all about? And as far as the like paying based on results, like, is that a case-by-case basis, or how does that work? Because that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, so we do like a low base fee just to cover some of our costs, and then the rest of it we charge like normally 20% of the increase in revenue that somebody makes. So we agree with them, like, here's the baseline, you're currently making this much, that's your, we're not helping with that because you're already getting that. So let's look at any increase in revenue we can get you above that. And then for as long as we're working together, then they pay us that as kind of the fee. And in terms of next steps, if anybody's interested just to learn more about like what we're teaching and what kind of methods we use, I interview my team, I interview other course creators on our podcast, which is The Art of Selling Online Courses. Or if anybody's interested in working with us, then they can go to datadrivenmarketing.co, and there's a link to book a call and we can check if you're a good fit. And we work with like about 10% of people who apply to work with us. We're quite picky about this, but we're incredibly polite. If you're not a good fit, we're going to send you through useful resources and help you make more money anyway. I had someone come up to me at a conference the other day and he said, I watched your talk last year and I implemented some of the tactics, and now I make $5,000 more every month on autopilot just from doing that. So I love that. So even if you're not a good fit, come over and we'll do our best to try and help you to figure this out yourself.
I love it. Wonderful. So the art of selling and marketing online courses, and datadrivenmarketing.co. And, you practice what you preach here, John, as far as it's really tempting to get pulled in all these different directions with your business, right? It's like Pepsi does a really good job, but then Pepsi says, oh, let's make some other flavor. And it's like, but the flavor that you have, it's what's working really well. And it's really tempting to try to like neglect building the audience, right? Like we all need to build a list, like you've been saying, and we need to grow, but it's tempting to sit and get comfortable and say, I've got this list, I've got this following, and I'm going to add all these offerings just for this following, and I'll just like try to grow there, but you end up getting stuck in a box. And instead, if you grow the audience and say, well, I'm going to get really good at this, having this one offer, and then be really picky about who I choose and like grow the universe of my following. And there's kind of like the people that buy, or like the diehard fans, which are the what we'll really target. And there's kind of the people on like the second outer layer who they can help from our knowledge and our blogs and our podcasts and our YouTube and all that, but they're not per se like our ideal client, and that's okay too. And so I think that's a lot healthier way of just being aware of what we're trying to grow and build here, as far as you be super specific and super focused about that offer and that ideal client, and just find more of those versus making all this new stuff for the existing following and not growing that. So that's just kind of a mental note I'm making for myself. So John Ainsworth from datadrivenmarketing.co. And as we're wrapping up and winding down here, John, I always think it's fun to end with a favorite motivational like quote or a moral or a lesson. So does anything come to mind? And it can be motivational or educational or whatever, but what comes to mind as far as like a bite-sized soundbite quote, moral, or lesson? What do you have?
Yeah, there's one I've got up on the wall here actually. It says, building a visionary company is 1% vision and 99% alignment. And it's from the book Good to Great by Jim Collins. And that's something I try and focus on. It's like, I have a tendency to come up with loads of new ideas, but you know what? It's just like, figure out the vision and then just put all the effort into like trying to achieve it.
I love it. Wonderful advice. put all that effort into achieving it. It's not just the vision, it's also the alignment. So if that sounds like you and you're someone that you say, it's finally time to take this seriously and to get this team to help me out, go right now to datadrivenmarketing.co and have that conversation and take that next step. And thank you, John, for showing up, stopping by, and giving us some really wonderful advice and motivation. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Robert. Really appreciate the chance to come and talk with you.